I'm Triya, and I'm a freshman at UNC, and today I'm going to be presenting on animal-based neurotoxins and all the ways they can kill you. So, for my research question, I proposed analyzing how various types of animal-based neurotoxins or neurotoxins in like venomous animals affect the brain and kill you in different ways, because it turns out there are a lot of different ways things can kill you. And as a person who likes neuroscience, it was interesting to learn about how susceptible your brain is to so many different things. So the first way in which a lot of neurotoxins affect the brain is by blocking potassium channels. So in neurons, there are many different channels that basically are in charge of keeping the voltage negative on like whenever it's polarized. Basically what happens is whenever an action potential is sent from the brain to tell something to do something, tell a body part to do something, it has to send it via each neuron. And each time an action potential is sent to a neuron, a bunch of positively charged ions flow into the cell, which therefore depolarizes it, or basically brings the charge closer to zero. And this in turn causes basically a chain reaction, which eventually causes in the movement of your arm or the beating of your heart. The problem is, when things like this are blocked, your body won't listen to what your brain says. So the first type of neurotoxins that block these act to maintain the resting potential, which is around negative 65 millivolts. And they're also responsible for repolarizing slow response action potentials. So what that means is basically, if you look at the graph, if the channel is blockaded, it'll take a longer time for it to wear off, which basically means you're paralyzed for a longer period of time. And this mechanism is also prevalent in other kinds of channels. So, for example, neurotoxins that block calcium channels. Calcium is really important to the heart because it helps the heart pump and therefore release blood to the rest of the body. But what happens when neurotoxins block calcium channels is that calcium can no longer enter and therefore your heart stops pumping, which can't really be very good for you. And blockage of calcium channels can also cause diminished vital blood flow, which leads to cardiogenic shock and potentially cardiac arrest. Basically, it constricts your blood vessels as well, which means your body parts can't receive as much blood. Sodium channels are basically similar to potassium channels because potassium and sodium are the two ions that a membrane is most selectively permeable to. So you may have heard in biology that a lot of cells have a phospholipid bilayer. So that's very true for neurons as well. And the selectively permeable doesn't necessarily mean that ions can't go through, because these channels are what allow it to go through using passive transport and facilitated diffusion. So if you look at the Na plus current, you can see that it's lower than it's supposed to be, and that's because these channels are blocked. And Na plus is not going in as fast as it's supposed to, and therefore the victim can have a lot of uncomfortable side effects such as dizziness, joint pain, and blurred vision because their body parts aren't doing what they're supposed to. And the final way in which I found a lot of animal-based neurotoxins affect the brain is through acetylcholine receptors. So you may have heard that acetylcholine plays a large part in neuromuscular junctions. So that's just a fancy way of saying they control your muscles and your motor system. So basically there are two receptors for acetylcholine. There's nicotinic and muscarinic. Nicotinic receptors are the faster ones. So they function via ions, whereas muscarinic ones function using G proteins, which is not relevant. The action at nicotinic receptors makes acetylcholine really important for making all your muscles move. So therefore, blocking these receptors leads to muscle weakness and paralysis and eventually death. So that was a lot of information, but basically the mechanisms are really similar, and this is where it starts to get interesting. Because if you look at all of these things that can kill you, there are the four different ways that they can kill you is each in a circle, and I made a Venn diagram showing where they interact. And if you look at the middle, there's only one thing that does all four of them, and it's a marine snail. Whereas if you think of things people are more afraid of, like snakes and spiders, they tend to block calcium channels. You can see there's a mamba here, scorpions, and a bunch of arachnids that block potassium and calcium channels. Whereas a lot of bugs, like hornets, octopi aren't bugs, but not the most commonly feared animals, technically end up being more dangerous. For example, coral, which does 3 of them. So all that goes to say, the next time you see something small, don't underestimate it, because Asian pufferfish and crate snakes and marine snails can end up being way more dangerous than a black widow. Thank you.
Which one out of the slides with the different symptoms would be rabies? Or like, would that be a calcium blocker or potassium blocker, or do you know? I think it's gonna be carried by a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because my thought is neurotransmitters technically aren't like hormones, so they're not transmitted through the blood.
Huh.
But I think rabies is transmitted through the blood. When,
So maybe it's not even the same thing.
So I'm not sure if it acts on these channels.
Yeah.
But I feel like eventually that would happen anyway.
Yeah. I know, I'm just thinking of things that blocks the brain, like the fear of water and, I don't know, maybe like signals.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye, Nelza. Anyway.
So the fear of, I think maybe, when people are infected with rabies, I think they do notice that there is hyperactivity in the amygdala, which is in charge of fear and aggression, which is why they exhibit more like fear and aggression.
Right.
So basically...
but it's more that activation than something like being blocked.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Although I would say, like, the chief inhibitory neurotransmitter, which is in charge of shutting things down, is GABA, so it is possible that it could affect that, and that's why you have less control. Because you're stopping the neuron that is telling you to not do those things.
Does like the ability or like the chance of whatever poison it is to like actually like enter the body like have an impact, or like does the carrying vessel impact how effective it's gonna be?
I'd say yeah, because
I think your computer just...
Oh, you're so right.
Don't look at my password. I'd say yeah, because like if you look at an octopus, it might not be able to transmit poison as easily as like a cryptotoxin carrying scorpion, because scorpions can sting you, whereas octopi would have to actually, their mouth is located in between their tentacles. So yeah, I think that could be why people fear snakes and spiders, maybe because the neurotoxin is more easily transmitted via the bloodstream and it goes up to the nervous system much faster. But I mean, a lot of these are also used to make antitoxins, so it's not like it's over for you if you've gotten bitten.
It's good to know.
So you got 4 shots in front of you, 1 with each, gun to your head. Which one are you injecting yourself with?
Okay, so I would rule out acetylcholine because that's like what causes Parkinson's if you don't have enough of it. Not calcium, because that's the heart. Potassium and sodium, I feel like, are evenly split between how dangerous they are because they're both in charge.
Yikes.
This just sounds all bad.
Yeah.
I'd say potassium channels is what I would.
You can always eat more bananas.
Yeah.